for joining today. Just some quick housekeeping. We have a Q&A form site that you can leverage if you have questions throughout the presentation. I'll drop that link in the chat, as well as please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, as well as just come off mute, raise your hand, and ask the question. So that's easy enough. I also wanted to just give a quick introduction to the greater DoD data and AI speed dating team, to include our counterparts on the FedCiv side. But you'll see here, these are your points of contact for all things DoD across Azure. These are the folks that support the different military departments. And then also Pedro can help support from the federal civilian side. And again, you'll have these slides following today's presentation for a quick reference. And then just wanted to kind of recap here, our future sessions that you'll have access to. There'll be a new link out for registration. Some of you probably have already registered for the April session. And we also have our May and June sessions scheduled here. So looking forward to those and look forward to your participation on those. In addition, some of the past sessions you'll see there that we've covered, those were great sessions, and those will be available as well for viewing at your leisure when that information gets sent out. So jumping right into the topic for today, and this is kind of a continuation of our series on Azure Open AI for government. Today, we're really focusing on our information assistant solution. And really, this is just one of the use cases that we're seeing across the federal government of having the ability to chat with your own data. And that's what Pedro Fuentes will be kind of walking us through today. And then later on in the presentation, David, you will be presenting more on some additional use cases we're seeing across the DoD. So that should be a great time for some Q&A and some better understanding around some use cases. So I'll turn it over to Pedro right now. Pedro, as stated, he's a director in our federal business, and he's really leading the charge in the FedCiv space with rolling out this information assistant that's leveraging Azure Open AI to help folks, chat with their own data, leverage the power of the Azure Open AI models with their own grounded data within their own organization. So I'll turn it over to you, Pedro.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew and team. So thank you, everybody, for coming in today. My name is Pedro Fuentes. I'm one of the leaders for the Civ side, or the federal civilian side, supporting the healthcare agencies and the federal financial. So my team, I have a team of specialists that support the federal civilian agencies, and a lot of what we do is focus on AI related work. So one of the things that I'm here to talk about is some of the use case that we found that have gotten a lot of traction in some of the federal civilian agencies. Next slide. Next slide, Andrew.
Yeah, it's being a little slow today for me.
Oh,
That's a little bit. Yeah, no worries. Did I go too far?
There we go. That's perfect. I think.
Yep.
Excellent. So as you probably are aware, Microsoft has been investing significantly in AI for decades now. And just now we've seen the explosion of AI in the past few years, with obviously the rise of ChatGPT and OpenAI services and our partnership with OpenAI. But for many years, we've had solutions, with Azure AI infrastructure. And these are like the four main capabilities that you see here today. Azure Cognitive Services, which is a service that allows, for character recognition, translation, and many others. It's a combination of services that allow AI capabilities to embed them into our applications. And the same thing with machine learning, and now more recently, over the past year and a half or so with the introduction of Azure Open AI, which is, the fruit of our partnership with OpenAI, in which we provide a service within our Azure environments that allows customers to deploy OpenAI models, large language models like GPT 3.5, GPT 3.4, in a secure environment within the customer's boundaries, and more importantly, where we guarantee that we won't use the customer's data to train our models, right? So this is something that is very appealing to government agencies, right? That being able to use these type of technologies, but in a secure manner. So with that, obviously, these are what we consider PaaS services or platform as a services. But what we've found out over the years, next slide, is that our customers, need a little bit of help in deploying these solutions, right? So when it comes to the industry accelerators, right? We have this group within Microsoft, which is the worldwide public sector team that has a group of developers that allows us to build these reference architectures to help our customers, right? Because, so many customers don't necessarily have a lot of developers or data scientists or solution engineers or infrastructure engineers to help build these complex architectures or solutions. So we sort of pre-built them for our customers so it's easier for them to deploy. By no means this is a complete solution that is meant for everybody, but it's something that allows our customers to kick the tires. And if it fits their model and they can take it to production, great. But if not, they can build upon it, right? And basically, it's like I said, an architecture where we have a group of components that allows us to have these solutions. In this case, what we're talking about today is the information assistant that is, very specific for industry. In this case, is for a public sector or government use. And it's all public information that is published in GitHub, and we'll have the link at the end of the presentation for you all can if you want to test this by yourself, you're more than welcome. If not, you can reach out to your friendly Microsoft solution specialist, and we would be more than happy to help you deploy this in your Azure environment. Next slide. It's still slow. Were you able to move it, Andrew? Did I lose you, Andrew? On my live? I apologize. I think we're having some technicals. I'll continue. So with the industry accelerators, we've come across several solutions. One of them is meant for open source intelligence. Another one is for intelligence discovery. And now with the rise of OpenAI, we have the AI information assistant. I'm still seeing the old slide. I don't know if it's just me. So there's a question. The accelerators are accessed via GitHub, and there's a link at the end of the slide, at the end of the deck, that will take you to the solution accelerator we're talking about today. Can we go to slide? There we go. Nope.
Pedro, while that's getting sorted out, there is a question in the chat. Someone asked, how are accelerators accessed?
Yes, so they are published in GitHub, and we'll have a slide, a link at the end of the presentation that will take you to the accelerator. And then obviously you would need access to an Azure subscription. to be able to deploy these services. Andrew,
Hey,
would it make more sense if I present? Let me share my screen and I'll present. I have the deck open. You'll confirm if you see the deck now.
Can see it. It looks good.
Perfect. Excellent. So going back, like I said, the industry accelerators are designed for specific use cases, that can be applied to your mission. It's a combination of code documentation that we provide at no charge to our customers. It's public information. And basically what it's meant to do is accelerate the time to value when using our Microsoft products, right? So we have a whole set of solution accelerators, for different use cases. In the case of DoD and the federal space, right? The open source intelligence is one solution. The Minted, which is a multi-intelligence discovery solution, and then the AI information assistant is the other one. So there's also, others for other industries like finance anomaly detection, cloud security, and cybersecurity. But today we're here to talk about the AI information assistant. So some of the challenges that we see across the federal space, right, is, with using large language models, is that when, we train these large language models, they are trained on public data up until a certain point of time, right? So if I'm recalling correctly, I think GPT 3.5 is trained up with public data up until 2021. But what about if you want to leverage information within your organization and these large language models? And this is where we have solutions where we can ground the model using your data. And grounding, and just to be very clear, grounding and tuning or training is something that is very different. But the idea is that we can take your data, send it to the model for inference, and then getting it back without having the need to train your data. So that's one of the things that we try to do with language models. They're like I said, they're trained on public data sets. We have obviously the issues, like for those of you that have used ChatGPT, right? We have what we call the fabrications or hallucinations, right? And then also another challenge is the lack of citations and references, right? So where did they come up with this idea? What was the thought process? So that's one of the things that we try to solve with Azure Open AI and the information assistance is, to have the ChatGPT-like experience, but we're adding the concept of citations, and then obviously the thought process as well. And by grounding it, and you'll see this on the demo, by grounding it, we'll be able to control the amount of hallucinations and within the system. By no means this is perfect, but it's something that we strive to, and we're getting better every time that we have a new model. So, like I said, the goal of the information assistant is to create an assistant or a ChatGPT-like experience that you can have a conversation within your private Azure environment. And as I mentioned, or may have not mentioned, this can be deployed in Azure Gov or IL4 or IL5 or Azure Commercial in IL4. So the idea is to make it relevant, with your public, or private domain data that you may have, to make it controlled, right? To make it sure that it's precise, and then be able to reference it, right? So that's something that is very important. And the idea is that it's something that is explainable, that we can explain the thought process that was used on that inference. So we have a question. I think, Kendra, that is up to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Or hey, this is Pedro. This is Stephen. As we're answering these questions, there was actually a question that came up in the chat. I was wondering if you could come off mute. It was asking about pushback for GitHub or open source repositories. I'm interested in kind of what you or potentially David, you or anybody else on the Microsoft side has to say about that question as we're going through the polling question.
I did not see this specific question. Can you read it to me as I'm sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like ESO on a PC account. Whoever had the question about GitHub or open source, if you could come off mute and ask your question, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, name's Rick Green with the VA. I'm on a personal phone right now, but in any case, there's a massive amount of skepticism and paranoia about open source and using GitHub that I've experienced at least over on my side of the fence. So I just wonder how other agencies are addressing that, or how you're addressing it to agencies to reassure them that the world's not going to end or whatever, if you know those kind of tools are utilized. Over.
Yeah, that is actually a great question. I mean, I think what we've done, or what we've seen on the Civ side, obviously, it has taken a while, but making sure that they go through their security accreditation process, and making sure that any application is stored, that is deployed from the open source or GitHub, that is thoroughly vetted through the security team. I don't know, David, if you have a better answer for that. But that's kind of like what we see now. I'm not a security expert by any means, but it's just working with the CISO and the security team on these regards, and we're receiving success.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a follow-up question. What specifically is the concern with open source? Is it just the fact that there could be a lot of different open source libraries out there and you might be introducing vulnerabilities without knowing? Is that kind of the main concern? Or if you can address that, I'd appreciate it. I guess that question goes to Rick.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's just a general malaise, I think, about the idea of having open source, particularly at the VA. We've got, healthcare records and things of that nature, which seem to be protected even more than, DoD classified material, for crying out loud. But because of that, there's a very, it just seems to me that there's a very strong, dislike for the idea of having open source over having something that we don't have a proprietary control over. But that's just my impression. The VA overall, we're not gonna get ChatGPT and Copilot and all that stuff until the end of this year, and it'll probably be old and out of date by the time we get to even look at it. But it's forbidden on our computers here for strange reasons. Although I can access open source and I can go to any chatbot that I want to that's on anybody's hosted website and use an AI powered chatbot. But I can't use ChatGPT directly. I can use Claude directly. So I can't figure it out. But that's just kind of the tundra that we're treading on right now. Over.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. So I think it's probably good to clarify that OpenAI or Azure OpenAI and Copilot, they are not open source. These are products within Azure and Microsoft, and it is proprietary. But having said that, I think you're probably talking about like OpenAI.com, basically getting access to internet-bound services. So like your, the ChatGPT that everybody knows about. So we're not talking about that specifically. I think most agencies in federal are concerned about their users going out directly to the internet and putting in proprietary information against OpenAI.com, right? But here, that's why Pedro's talking about grounding your data and specifically using Azure OpenAI, which is different than the OpenAI.com. Because if you use Azure OpenAI, then you address those security concerns. It doesn't go out to the internet. It is grounded on your data, and also kind of builds in the defense in depth mechanism. So you can put networking and API management layers on top of Azure OpenAI to build in those additional security controls that every agency needs.
Yeah. And to add to David's point, right, we don't use the customer's data to train the model. And that's a big differentiator of using Azure OpenAI versus ChatGPT and their own website, right? So that is something to keep in mind as well. All right, shall we continue?
Fantastic. Appreciate it, Pedro. Thank you for answering that question, and David too. Go ahead, back to you, bud.
Excellent. So this is kind of the interface, and we're going to see this in the demo, but I wanted to give you a brief view of it, right? The solution is built, includes a web app, right, that gives you this very rich interface that allows you to add data and just basically have a chat experience within your environment. It also gives you the capabilities of uploading your data, creating folders, and we'll see that all in the demo. So how does it work, right? And this is why this is important, right? Because the solution accelerator basically is taking all of these components that would normally take you months to build, and is pre-creating this for you in a template that you can actually go in and deploy it in your environment in a matter of a couple of hours. We've been doing these, and especially in the civilian side, we've been doing these deploy-a-thons, which is basically a 4-hour event where customers come in with their Azure subscriptions, and we have architects that help them deploy this architecture in a couple of hours. But just to give you an idea, the user has an interface, right, that sits on a web app, an Azure web app, obviously, that allows them to do the prompt engineering and the interaction with the model, right? And it also allows them to upload files into a blob storage. So once the files are uploaded into the blob storage, we have Azure search and indexing, or Azure Indexer, that is actually taking that data, creating an index, and then if there's a need for any specific document intelligence, then we'll use other services to do the extraction or the chunking, to breaking it up into pieces. And then there's also capabilities built in that if the document is in a foreign language, it allows you to do translation, or for any visual components of the document, it'll run it through computer vision. So this is an all-encompassing solution. And like I said, this would take months for somebody trying to build it themselves. This is something that our team built for customers. And our federal team actually played a heavy role in this, because we wanted to make sure that it had all the requirements that our federal agencies require, like identity and things like that, and private endpoints. So we spent a lot of time on this. As far as security controls, right? Just wanted to make a brief, kind of like differentiate OpenAI with Azure OpenAI, obviously. And here's a couple of things, right? The virtual network's a very important thing. Being able to deploy this in your virtual network into your own environment is something that is key. Customer managed keys, right? That you can manage the keys, that you have privacy standards, right? And obviously, very importantly, FedRAMP accreditation, right? Because Azure OpenAI and all of the services that we use this be it in Gov or Azure Commercial, they're all FedRAMP accredited, right? Which is something that you don't get when you use OpenAI by itself or ChatGPT. But you'll get a copy of this, and this is something that, if there's any specific questions, we can go into more. So what is in the box, right? Basically, it is custom code, right? Like app services to get integration of the app services, app insights, Cosmos DB, form recognizer, obviously Azure Open AI. So there is the configuration code for all of those Azure services, the deployment kit, which is the scripts to get these systems or services deployed in your Azure environment. There's also a cost calculator that allows you to examine the cost or the impact of deploying this in your environment, and then obviously documentation on diagrams, configurations, and all the things that you needed if you decide to take this into production that will help you get these deployed. And then obviously we can do workshops. We can do 2-session workshops or any workshop. Work with your Microsoft, your Microsoft team member that supports your Azure solutions, and would be more than happy to, set up some type of workshop. And I know David is going to talk a little bit about those as well. So how do I get access? So this is the link. If you want to take this QR code, we'll share this presentation. But this is a link to the actual code itself. And with that said, let's take a look at this demonstration. You bear with me here a minute. Let me bring my slide. So this is based, what we're going to see today was based on a demonstration that we did for federal civilian agency. I'm not going to name, but they're not actively using this, but they're in the process of looking at this. And this is a sort of a demo we built for them. So this agency does several things, right? And just to give you a little bit of context, right? They operate with, hiring personnel into the federal government. They work with compensation and things like that. That help the agencies hire people into the federal agencies, right? So one of the things that they do, and we did a demo for them where they had a situation and where they write a lot of lengthy regulations for the federal agencies in order to have incentives to hire, for example, cybersecurity professionals. As a manager at Microsoft, it's very hard sometimes to work or hire the right people and get the right offers out there because you have competing events. As you're all aware, painfully in the federal space, it's very hard to compete against the private sector because when you have a young candidate coming out of college, right, specifically around the cybersecurity area, it's very hard to provide a competing salary against, let's say a private company that would pay more, right? So they write these regulations around these programs, very lengthy documents that state the available solutions or programs that allow them to hire people. And then also this agency is the one that publishes all the job postings for the federal government, right? So they have thousands of, not millions of job postings for the federal government, and what do they do, and the hiring. And I took a couple of postings from that agency that are public data, and these two are kind of interesting because I thought they were the same thing, but they're not. They're actually jobs in the State Department. One is the Foreign Affairs Officer, and the other one is a Foreign Services Officer. And I had a relative that was asking me what's the difference, and we got into it, and we put this into the demo. So just to give you a context, right? When it comes to the accelerator itself, this is the portal that you see. As you see, very similar to what you would have in a ChatGPT kind of like experience, right? You type your question here, and then you can have adjustments, right? So you can adjust it. In this case, you can say, okay, the response length, you can be very succinct, you can be standard, or it can be thorough. So the length of the response, you can tweak there. You can set up personas, right? You can say, well, assume that you're answering as an analyst, where we have here. And then, for example, the conversation type, if it's balanced, if you want to be more creative or more precise, right? And then the folders are basically a group of folders where you have specific data. So if you want to have a very narrow, specific response from a specific folder, then you select the folder that you want to look the data on. In this case, I selected our other federal agency, and we'll see through the demo. So in this case, I will start warning you all that the system is a little bit slow because this is very popular and everybody's using it. But the first question that I want to ask is this one, and I already have it pre-typed. I'm going to paste it here to save some time. But what I want to ask the assistant is a federal agency wants to hire a college student who is graduating with a degree in cybersecurity for a GS 2210 information security position in Washington, D.C. The student has a competing job offer of $96,000. How can the agency combine pay flexibilities to match or beat this job offer? Now, as a manager, like even at Microsoft in the private sector, that would take me normally days because I would have to contact somebody at HR or another manager to find out what are my options, right? In the federal government, it's very hard as well because you would have to go in and either open up a case with HR, and this research could take days. So let's see what the models come back with. Obviously, I pointed it to the specific folder, and it should give me an answer. Oh, that was very quick. An answer based on this solution. So in this case, the answer is telling me the situation, right? $96,000 for a GS to whatever position in Washington, D.C. And here's the steps that the agency can take. Use the superior qualifications and special needs pay setting authority, which amounts to $61,000. Offer a recruitment incentive. The agency can offer up to 10% with a 3-year service based on the candidate's pay for $61,000. That's another $18,000. And then offer to repay the student loans. The agency can offer to repay the candidate's student loan of $7,000 per year, totaling $25,000. If you combine those pay flexibilities, the total compensation would amount to $100,000, therefore beating the $96,000 offer. So think about it in your agency. How long would have had taken you to get a response as quick as this for a situation like this, which is very specific, very, very detailed. So I think that's a very cool solution that we have. And I want to be mindful of time because I want to leave enough time to David. The other thing that I wanted to show you all is, for example, you remember the two postings that we have for a State Department Foreign Service Officer versus a Foreign Affairs Officer, right? I wanted to understand what is the difference between these two job posts. And then I basically type in a question, can you explain the difference between the duties of a Foreign Service Officer or a Foreign Affairs Officer? Again, another question that probably would take me some time to research. I have put it in, it went into the both, did inference into the model, and then it gave me a very thorough explanation of, what is the solution, right? The duties of a Foreign Service Officer, as I mentioned, it gives me another answer. And just to show you the power of this, right? Well, let's say if I'm a hiring manager and want to make up a job that combines the two solutions, right? Well, write me up another job posting that combines the duties and responsibilities of a Foreign Service Officer and a Foreign Affairs Officer. Let's see what it comes up with. Boom. Here we go. And it's basically a combination, Foreign Service Officer, Foreign Affairs Officer, and it's basically writing a combination of these two job roles. Perfect. So this is what I have. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to show is obviously how do we get the data into this solution assistant? In this case, we go to the manage content, and here we have the capabilities of creating folders or adding data to an existing folder, then we basically upload the files here. And then once it's done, we can go back and check what is the status, whether complete or not, and adding the data that we uploaded. So that was it from my part. I will pass it over now to David.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pedro. I think, are we going to be able to share the screens again with the PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, David, let me see if I can have better luck this time. Give me a second.
Okay. Andrew's having some issues with the laptop, so glad to hear that you're back.
Yeah.
While he's pulling that up, I'll just start with the intro. My name is David Yu. I support the federal agencies as Chief Architect of Data and AI. I have the pleasure of engaging with the civilian customers, the DoD customers, and Intel customers. So it's a very broad space with different use cases. For today's presentation, I'll be focusing mainly on the DoD use cases, but you're going to see that some of the use cases that I talk about can be easily adopted by federal civilian agencies as well, such as Veterans Affairs. So we'll begin with that. So I'm just going to simply share 3 use cases and then jump into a demo for one of them. The first use case that I'll share with you is called multi-agent smart search architecture. So this is a demo that builds on top of what you saw, or it builds on the idea of the info assistant, but it does a little bit more nuanced and complex scenarios. So here's the architecture of the solution, and then we can dive into a demo of this. So let me kind of break down this architecture for you. On the left-hand top, we have the large language models. So for this, we default to Azure Open AI, GPT-4, which is currently available in Azure Government Cloud. But we also have about 100 open source models. And so open source models are large language models. Most of them are not as big and performant as the GPT-4, but many times the open source models are a good enough solution for many of the use cases. So we have the Mistral AI 7 billion parameter model. This is considered small, and it is open source, so that's why the customers in DoD like this a lot. And then we have the Meta Llama, Llama version 2, and version 2 has the 7 billion, the 13 billion, and the 60 or 70 billion model, and all 3 of them are open source. So we got those options here that are popular in DoD. There's other models besides this. You may have heard of models like Falcon, Lava. So those are all fair game, but here we're just showing the 3 of the most popular models that DoD uses. The main point of this demo is the multi-data source or multi-agent capabilities. So on the left side, under data sources, you see that there is a SQL database. This database hosts a COVID data. This was just raw data in a table. So this one shows the capability of a user asking a natural language question, which then gets converted to a SQL query. And we execute the SQL query against the SQL database to retrieve the answer. The second data source here is the VV8, which is an open source database that you can host on a Kubernetes service, acts as a vector database. So if you have documents like PDFs or Word documents, you can process it, vectorize it, and store it in this vector DB. So you can enable the RAG search experience. The third data source is a Azure storage account, so that you may want to just drop in some CSV files or just raw data directly into storage, and the system will be able to pick that up. The fourth data source here is AI search. So this is for your PDF documents, Word documents that you can drop into the AI search pipeline. The pipeline automatically uses advanced AI services like text analytics, document intelligence, and computer vision, OCR, to extract the metadata in your PDF. So if you have an image in your PDF document, then it's going to use OCR to extract the description of the image. If it's an image of a person playing with a dog, then it's going to label that picture as person playing with a dog. And when you search on it, when you search for dog, you will get that image as a part of the results. So it's a multimodal AI search experience that AI search service enables. And then lastly, the fifth data source is the API interface. So pretty much anything that has an API, which is pretty much, 95% of the systems that are built out there has API interfaces. You can also add that as a data source. So the intent of this demo, while we're just showing 5 data sources, the intent of the demo is to show the art of the possible of many different data sources. You can have 15, 20 different data sources. Most of the federal organizations have many different data sources of different type. So this shows the art of the possible of having this massive data sources in a modular plug and play architecture, so that as a user on the right side, if I'm using a web interface, like you see in 1A, or if I'm using a Teams interface, which you see in 1B, as a user, I don't have to worry about what's behind the scenes, what data sources are supporting it. All I care about is my question, and the system will be smart enough to figure out to take my question and route it to the correct data sources and get me the correct answer. Okay, so that's how this demo works. So at this point, I will take the screen so I can show the demo, and then we'll come right back to the presentation to wrap up with the 2 other use cases. So can everybody see my screen right now?
Yeah, we got you, David.
Okay, fantastic. So here is the demo of the multi-agent multi-tooling solution. When I come to the landing page, you'll see a short description of what I have available. So I have the ability to go directly out to the Bing search. I have the ability to go through a Azure Open AI. Again, in the previous session, we described that Open AI is different than Azure Open AI, even though it's the same model. Azure Open AI is a isolated OpenAI instance that's sitting in Azure Cloud with the security constructs built into it, such as RBAC, Azure Active Directory, and API management. So that's ChatGPT, Azure OpenAI. The third data source is the Doc Search, which is the Azure AI search service that I described in the architecture diagram. This fourth data source, we call it Book Search, but this is mainly to show that we can process large documents. So in this case, we're processing an entire book, rich dad, poor dad, and lengthy documentation like public Azure AI search documentation. All right, just to show that we can process complex, lengthy, nuanced documents into the search experience. And then lastly, the SQL search is the SQL database example that you saw on the architecture diagram. Okay, so here we'll just run through a few examples so you can see how this works. The first one we'll do is hit the SQL query. So here I can say SQL search, how many people died in the West Coast in COVID in 2020? And this is COVID data, so we're asking COVID-related questions. And I apologize that I'm asking such a gloomy question. I was showing this demo to another person, and that was the feedback I got. David, can you make my day brighter? So I promise I will ask a more brighter question next time. But in this case, you can see that the tool went through the code and found out that, okay, there's a table named COVID tracking. So this is probably the right table. And then it went through to generate a query, to select statement. And then it actually took the code and executed the query against the SQL database. And then here it returned the results. So it's 3.6 million approximately, and then it gives me a short description of how it obtained the answer. So there's really two things that it did here. Mainly, it took the word West Coast in the question, and it recognized that West Coast means California, Oregon, and Washington. And if you search for that information, that turns out to be the correct interpretation. I frankly didn't know what West Coast was, what was defined as, but it turns out that that's the right answer. And then it generated a query based on that information and then return the answer. So at this point, if I copy this query and just go to my SQL database and execute the query, you'll see at the bottom here that it does actually give me the exact same number, right? So that's the query SQL experience. Now let's jump into the second one, and we'll go to Doc Search. So again, Doc Search is the AI search service as a data source, and this has about 9,000 PDF documents pre-processed through the AI pipeline that includes text analytics and OCR, etc. And here, if I ask the question, does chloroquine really work against COVID? Then it's going to go into that data source and begin its searching effort. And in the AI search service, all of these documents are chunked up and indexed. So AI search provides all of those capabilities, the indexing and the vector capabilities. So here I get the direct answer that is grounded on my data, right? 9,000 documents. This is not grabbing the answer from the internet. If you're seeing other answers out in the internet, obviously this is not going to be consistent with what you find on the internet, because this is grounded on the 9,000 documents. And again, this gives you the citation experience, so you can actually click on the link and go to the source of the answer. And I think this is going to be, yeah, there you go. So here's the source of where I found that specific part of the answer. Okay, so I'll show one last example for this. So one of the other things that GPT is really good at is coding. So here I want to ask ChatGPT, write a Python script explaining script that shows the histogram and average from COVID tracking table. So we'll let that one run. But yeah, this is, I would say, a little bit humorously that about, ChatGPT is pretty good at coding. I would say it codes better than half the people I know. So I think that it's really important to leverage this capability. And let me try that one more time. I wonder if I missed the @ sign. Okay, so this is an example. It wasn't the one that I was intending, but I think this is still good. And this is what I was intending here. So you can see that because there's a memory function built into this solution, it remembers that I asked a question about how many people died from COVID, and that the fact that I pulled it from the COVID tracking table. So then it now refers to that and actually pulls the average and the histogram of the data set. And then because I asked it to generate it in Python, it generates an entire Python script that I can copy and paste into my Jupyter notebook. And this particular piece of code uses a very popular data science tool called Pandas library and then automatically kind of uploads the data into the Pandas, so I can analyze the histogram and the average and the profiling of the data set. So very powerful tooling for developers or data scientists to generate code and get started very quickly. So that's the demo. There's more things I can show here, but that's the demo in essence for the multi-agent chatbot experience. If we can Actually, one second. Let me show this slide, and then we can pivot. So this is kind of the concept of the multi-agent solution. In the traditional RAG solution, you try to have one model that tries to answer all the questions, and they're just good at everything. Some people call this AGI, right? On the multi-agent architecture, you try to create specialized agents. So one agent might be really good at finance, another one might be good at budgeting, another one might be a HR specialist. So you try to create these modular functional LLM agents, and you piece them all together, like in the diagram that I showed in the architecture. So with that, we'll kind of go back to the PowerPoint Andrew was showing earlier to cover two other use cases. So that one, the multi-agent use case, you can see that it can easily apply to the civilian agencies as well. These next two use cases are probably more for DoD, but I hope that this would be a great use case to kind of ponder on, and maybe there will be some use cases in the Civ. So this one is a example of a drone connecting a large language model to drone use cases. So you can ask or you can provide a command directly to the drone using natural language, and it's going to then send the command into the drone, execute the mission. So like in the prototyping stages, this could be as simple as, hey, drone, can you fly over a latitude, longitude point and make a circle around that point? And then it'll perform its mission, and then it'll come back to your landing spot. But what you're seeing in this image is that during the mission, the drone ran into a unpredictable incident. So it caught fire. So what you're seeing here is then a picture of the drone being taken along with the logs that are generated by the drone. And the picture and the logs are then together processed into Azure Open AI. And on the right side, it's generating a after action report. So you can see that in the summary, it says the drone experienced critical pre-flight failures related to both vertical and horizontal velocity stability, as indicated by multiple log entries. And I won't read through everything, but it basically suspects that there were repeated emergency messages regarding low battery. So it's predicting that because of the low battery, it stopped performing the mission. And so that information is again collected from the logs and the picture itself. So this is an example of a multimodal image and text processing by Azure Open AI. So if you're a analyst or a person responsible for reporting on incidents, you can see how this may be extremely helpful to get you that first version of the report. And then as an analyst, you can modify or adjust it to your needs, and then you can send it out to the folks that needs to see the report. And then the next use case, if you can go next slide, is a situation understanding use case where many cases in the military field for DoD, they need to send out a drone to assess the battlefield. And so you fly drones out to capture images. And this is a use case where the pictures are then fed into Azure Open AI, and Azure Open AI then collectively creates a contextual understanding of what it's seeing in the images, right? So it's not just on one image. If it's taking a picture every 60 seconds, then it's interpreting the first picture, and then it interprets the second picture in relation to the first picture, and then it interprets a third picture in relation to the previous picture. So it's almost like creating a storyline in a video, so that as a commander, I can see what the battlefield context looks like. So that comes to the end of my section of presentation. I believe there's 2 minutes left, but we can take any questions or wrap up at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I know that was a lot of to cover, but we really do appreciate it. You and Pedro covering down really across the federal landscape from a federal civilian standpoint, as well as what we're seeing in the DoD. So really appreciate that. We'll be sharing out these slides with our contact information. So if you'd like to follow up and discuss further some of the things that you've seen today that both David and Pedro demonstrated, that'll be a good way to reach out to us. There's also a link for feedback on the session where we can also get your information there. So I know we're wrapping up here, just a few more slides. As I mentioned, right, we've had some previous sessions, and when you get the recording for this session, you also get access to our previous sessions as well. So you'll have that content. And now we also have a podcast, Data Talk. You can find where you get anywhere you get your podcast is now available with additional content if that's something you're interested in. And then I mentioned this feedback link, which I dropped in the chat. You can also get hold of us using that form as well. So I appreciate everybody, your patience, especially with some of my technical difficulties. But thank you, David, Pedro, and others for jumping in there and making it a smooth transition. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to future conversations, and please don't hesitate to reach out. Take care.